"Dude, this is going to be epic," Danny said, practically bouncing on his heels. His flashlight beam danced across the broken chain-link fence, the jagged metal edges jutting out like teeth. We all stood there, staring into the shadows of the abandoned Carnival, a place none of us had any business being. I wasn't sure what unsettled me more, the eerie silence coming from the grounds or the faint scent of burnt popcorn hanging in the cold night air. The Carnival had been shut down before any of us were even born, yet here we were, daring each other to explore a place even the locals refused to talk about. "You're not chickening out, are you, Mark?" Sarah asked with a teasing smirk, her dark hair catching the moonlight. "No," I lied. I tightened my grip on my flashlight. This whole thing felt wrong, but there was no way I was going to be the one to back out. Chris climbed through the fence first, grunting as his jacket snagged on the jagged wire. "Come on, it's just a bunch of rust and old rides. Don't let the urban legends freak you out." Mia followed him, but she hesitated at the fence's edge, glancing back at us. What if someone's still here? Danny barked a laugh. "Who? A bunch of clowns waiting to scare trespassers? Relax, it's a carnival, not a horror movie." One by one, we slipped through the fence and into the carnival grounds. The moment my feet crunched against the gravel, the air felt heavier, like the entire place was holding its breath. The rides loomed in the distance, silhouettes against the inky sky. "See? Nothing to be afraid of," Chris said, gesturing toward the ticket booth. The old wooden structure was still intact, its peeling paint revealing streaks of weathered gray. And then it happened. The booth lit up. A flickering yellow glow radiated from inside, casting jagged shadows across the ground. A neon sign above it sputtered to life, buzzing faintly. "Welcome." "What the hell?" Sarah whispered. Danny, of course, was the first to approach. Probably some old wiring still kicking around. He reached into the booth and grabbed a faded red ticket from the dispenser. The speakers crackled, and then a deep, gravelly voice rang out, distorted like it was coming from underwater. "Let the games begin." I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't just the words, it was the laughter that followed. Low and guttural, it seemed to echo from everywhere, surrounding us. "What was that?" Mia whispered, clutching my arm. "We should leave," I said, trying to steady my voice. But before anyone could move, the Ferris wheel groaned. Its massive structure shuddered, then began to turn, creaking slowly against the stillness of the night. No wind, no power, it just started moving. And that's when I knew we weren't alone. The sound of the Ferris wheel groaning filled the air, sharp and grating, like bones grinding against each other. It moved too smoothly for something abandoned for decades. Each creak made my chest tighten, my flashlight trembling in my hand. "See? It's just old machinery," Danny said, his voice faltering despite the forced confidence. "Someone probably rigged it to mess with people like us." "Yeah, because nothing says prank like fixing up a rusted death trap in the middle of nowhere," Sarah shot back, her eyes darting toward the carousel. Its chipped horses gleamed under a faint light, their mouths twisted in unsettling snarls. Mia hadn't let go of my arm since we crossed through the gate. Her nails dug into my jacket as she whispered, "This feels wrong. We shouldn't be here." She wasn't wrong. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but instead I tried to play it cool. "Let's just check it out quickly. 5 minutes, then we're out." Chris nodded. "Stick together. Nobody wanders off." Of course, Danny ignored him completely. "Relax, guys. It's just an old carnival," Danny called out as he marched toward the bumper cars. He hopped into one, smacking the wheel with a grin. "See? Nothing to worry about." The ride lit up. Every car flickered to life in a wash of sickly yellow and green lights. The speakers crackled, blasting distorted carnival music so loud I flinched. Danny froze, his grin replaced by wide-eyed shock. "Okay, what the hell? Who turned this on?" Danny yelled, scrambling out of the car. No one answered. Suddenly, the bumper cars began moving on their own, slamming into each other violently, metal screeching against metal. The sound was deafening. One car turned sharply, its headlights locking onto Danny like a predator spotting prey. "Danny, get out of there!" Sarah screamed. He didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted back toward us, barely dodging the rogue bumper car as it veered off the track and smashed into the side of a concession stand. The lights died out as abruptly as they'd come on, leaving us in silence again. "What the hell?" Danny panted, bending over to catch his breath. Chris's face was pale. "This isn't a prank. It can't be. I told you we should have left," Mia hissed. Her voice cracked, and she clung to me like her life depended on it. Then we heard it, a low, guttural chuckle. It came from the carousel. We turned toward it as the old ride sprang to life. The warped music ground out a haunting melody, and the horses began to move, their chipped legs jerking forward. One horse turned its head toward us. I swear, its hollow eyes locked onto me. "This place is alive," Sarah said, her voice barely audible over the music. Before anyone could respond, a scream cut through the night. It was Mia. She pointed toward the roller coaster tracks, her hand trembling. "Someone's there." I swung my flashlight in the direction she was pointing, and that's when I saw it. A shadow. It darted across the tracks, moving too fast to be human. Danny laughed nervously, backing away. "Okay, I've seen enough. Let's get the hell out of here." But before we could move, the lights of the funhouse flickered on, its entrance glowing like an open mouth. The words, "Enter if you dare," were scrawled above it in dripping red paint that looked too fresh. The door creaked open. Something inside was inviting us in. The funhouse loomed in front of us like a hungry beast, its open door practically daring us to step inside. Red and yellow lights flickered erratically around the frame, casting grotesque shadows that twisted and stretched along the ground. Every fiber of my being screamed to turn back, but Danny, of course, took a step forward. "Danny, don't," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He turned to me with a nervous grin. "What, you think the ghost clowns are going to get us? It's just a creepy old funhouse." "We shouldn't split up," Chris called out, his voice cracking. "We're not splitting up, we're investigating," Danny shot back, already halfway inside. The rest of us exchanged looks, but there wasn't time to argue. Reluctantly, we followed. The moment we stepped in, the door slammed shut behind us with a force that shook the walls. Mia let out a startled yelp, and I spun around, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. "We're locked in," I said through gritted teeth. Danny's flashlight beam swung across the room, revealing distorted mirrors that lined the walls. They reflected warped, twisted versions of ourselves, elongated limbs, hollow eyes, mouths stretched into unnatural smiles. "Okay, this is creepy," Danny admitted, his bravado slipping. "Look," Sarah whispered, pointing to the floor. It was covered in dusty footprints leading deeper into the funhouse. "They're fresh," Chris muttered. "Who else could be in here?" Mia's voice trembled. "Let's just keep moving," I said, taking the lead. My flashlight lit up a narrow hallway ahead, the walls covered in peeling paint and smeared handprints. As we moved deeper, the air grew colder, heavier. The funhouse's laughter track, faint and tinny at first, started playing through hidden speakers. The sound grew louder with every step until it was a cacophony, overlapping giggles that made my skin crawl. Then came the first trap. A section of the floor collapsed beneath Sarah's feet, and she barely managed to leap back in time. A long drop into pitch-black nothingness yawned below. "Stay close," Chris barked, his voice shaking. We crept forward more cautiously now, but the funhouse wasn't done with us. A wall suddenly shifted, slamming shut and separating Mia and Danny from the rest of us. "Mia, Danny," Sarah screamed, pounding on the wall. "I'm here," Mia called back, her voice muffled. "We'll find another way." "Stay where you are. Don't move," I yelled, but I could already hear their footsteps fading away. Chris, Sarah, and I pressed on, my gut twisting with every step. The laughter from the speakers faded, replaced by a new sound. Whispers. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered. We stopped, straining to listen. The whispers were faint at first, growing clearer with each step. They were calling our names. Mark, Chris, Sarah. My flashlight flickered, and I felt something cold brush against my arm. I spun around, but no one was there. "I don't like this," Sarah muttered, clutching her flashlight like it was a lifeline. We entered another room, this one filled with animatronic clowns posed in grotesque scenes, one juggling severed heads, another riding a tricycle with a maniacal grin. "They're just statues," Chris said, though he didn't sound convinced. That's when one moved. Its head turned sharply toward us, its glassy eyes locking on mine. Its mechanical mouth creaked open, releasing a horrible, distorted laugh. "Run!" I shouted. We bolted down a narrow hallway, the sound of mechanical gears grinding behind us. I didn't dare look back. We finally burst into a larger room, the walls lined with mannequins dressed as carnival workers. Each one was frozen in a pose of anguish, hands raised to shield their faces, mouths open in silent screams. "This isn't real," Chris muttered to himself, shaking his head. "It can't be real." But then one mannequin moved, its head tilting ever so slightly. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Before I could respond, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the funhouse. It was Mia, and it was coming from somewhere ahead. Mia's scream sent a jolt through my body like an electric shock. Chris and Sarah froze, their wide eyes darting toward the sound. It came from deep within the funhouse, echoing off the walls so much that pinpointing the direction was impossible. "We have to find her," I said, forcing myself to move, even as every instinct screamed at me to run the other way. "This place is messing with us," Chris muttered, his knuckles white as he gripped his flashlight. "It's like it's alive." "It doesn't matter. We can't just leave her," Sarah snapped, taking off ahead. The hallway twisted and narrowed as we followed, the walls closing in like the carnival itself wanted to swallow us whole. Faint whispers danced in the air, saying things I couldn't quite make out. My flashlight flickered again, throwing our shadows against the warped walls, making them move like they had minds of their own. Then we found the door. It was old, made of splintering wood, with a faded sign above it that read, "Maintenance," in chipped red paint. There was no reason to stop, but something about it pulled me in. "Wait," I said, grabbing Sarah's arm. "What now?" she hissed, her voice shaky. "I don't know, just this might help." I pushed the door open, the rusty hinges screeching in protest. Inside was a cramped room filled with dusty tools, rusted pipes, and stacks of papers. But what caught my eye was the leather-bound journal sitting on a workbench, its cracked cover glowing faintly under the beam of my flashlight. Chris picked it up, flipping through the brittle pages. "What is this?" "Look at the dates," Sarah said, leaning over his shoulder. "It's from 30 years ago, the year the carnival shut down." We skimmed the entries, and my stomach twisted with every word. The journal belonged to the carnival's owner, a man named Gregory Faust. At first, the entries were normal, notes about ride maintenance and business expenses. But as the dates went on, they grew darker. Attendance is down. I need more time, more souls. The entity demands payment. The carnival must feed. The fire wasn't enough. The screams weren't enough. It wants more. Chris's hands trembled as he read the final entry aloud. I made the deal. It promised me immortality in exchange for their souls. Is alive now, and I am its keeper. It will never let me leave, and neither will it let them. What does that mean? Sarah whispered, her face pale. It means this place isn't just haunted, I said, my voice hollow. It's cursed. Before we could process it, the walls trembled, and the sound of heavy, uneven footsteps echoed outside the room. Turn off the light, Chris hissed. I clicked off my flashlight and we huddled in the darkness, holding our breaths. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside the door. Something scratched against the wood, a slow, deliberate scrape. I bit down on my lip, trying not to make a sound. Sarah's hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt. Then the door creaked open. In the faint light filtering from the hallway, I saw it. A clown. But it wasn't a costume or an animatronic. Its face was leathery and grotesque. Its smile too wide, teeth too sharp. Its eyes glowed faintly, searching the room like it could smell us. It sniffed the air, its head twitching violently. Then it moved on, its footsteps fading into the distance. "Let's go," Chris whispered, his voice barely audible. We crept back into the hallway, our steps as quiet as we could manage. But the carnival wasn't done with us. The walls shifted again, slamming shut behind us and separating Chris from Sarah and me. "Chris!" Sarah screamed, banging on the wall. "I'll find you," he shouted from the other side. "Just keep moving." I pulled Sarah forward, ignoring her protests. Every second we stayed in this place felt like a step closer to death. We turned a corner and entered another room. This one was lined with hanging funhouse mirrors, each one reflecting something that wasn't quite right. In one, I saw myself, but older, beaten, bloodied, my eyes hollow. In another, I saw Sarah, screaming silently as shadowy hands dragged her into darkness. "Don't look," I said, grabbing her arm. "Keep moving." But the whispers were back, louder this time. "Mark, Sarah." We stumbled out of the room and found ourselves in an open space. A flickering neon sign above us read, "The Big Top," in jagged letters. "It's leading us somewhere," Sarah said, her voice trembling. And as much as I hated to admit it, she was right. Somewhere ahead, Mia screamed again. This time, it sounded like a cry for help. The Big Top loomed in front of us, its tattered red and white stripes glowing under the flickering neon sign. The air reeked of burnt sugar and rust, and the faint echoes of carnival music seeped through the cracks of the heavy canvas. "This is it," Sarah whispered, clutching my arm. Her voice wavered and I could feel her trembling. "It wants us to go inside," I said, staring at the open flap of the tent. My flashlight flickered, casting faint beams into the darkness beyond. "Whatever this place is, it's been hurting us here the whole time." Mia's scream rang out again, louder now, closer. "We have to try," Sarah said, her voice breaking. She pushed ahead before I could stop her. With no other choice, I followed. The inside of the tent was massive, impossibly large, like it couldn't have fit within the carnival grounds. Rows of skeletal figures filled the stands, their hollow eyes staring down at us. Some were missing limbs, others had gaping holes where their faces should have been, yet they all seemed to breathe in unison. A slow, rattling sound that made my skin crawl. In the center of the ring stood the ringleader. He was tall, unnaturally so, with long spindly limbs and a face painted like a clown's, but the makeup couldn't hide the decayed flesh beneath. His eyes glowed an unsettling yellow, and his grin stretched far too wide, splitting his cheeks. "Welcome, welcome," he boomed, spreading his arms as if greeting an old friend. His voice was deep, oily, like it seeped into my bones. "The final act has arrived." Sarah took a step back, her breath hitching. "Where's Mia?" she demanded. The ringleader chuckled, his laugh echoing through the tent. "Oh, she's here. She's a part of the show now." He gestured to one of the stands, and there, seated among the skeletal audience, was Mia. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror, but her body didn't move. She was frozen, like a doll propped in place. "Mia!" Sarah screamed, running toward her, but she didn't make it far. The ground shifted beneath her feet, the dirt transforming into a sticky, black sludge. Sarah stumbled, falling to her knees, and the ringleader's grin widened. "She won't hear you," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "None of them do. Their souls belong to the Carnival now, and soon, so will yours." I grabbed Sarah, pulling her free from the sludge. "Run!" I shouted, but the tent flaps slammed shut behind us, trapping us inside. The skeletal audience began to move, their heads turning in unison to watch us. Their empty eye sockets seemed to bore into me, and I felt the air grow colder. The ringleader raised his arms and the lights in the tent flickered. "You've been such wonderful players," he said, "but every game must end. Will you join the carnival, or shall we make it quick?" "Not a chance," I growled. "Ah, the defiant one," he mused, "always entertaining." Then the rides came alive. The Ferris wheel burst through the side of the tent, its glowing light spinning wildly as it rolled toward us. The carousel horses galloped in, their chipped mouths snapping hungrily. I grabbed Sarah's hand and bolted toward the center ring, dodging the chaos. A nearby concession stand caught my eye, its rusted popcorn machine leaking oil onto the ground. "Help me with this," I yelled, dragging Sarah toward it. "What are you doing?" she shouted. I didn't answer. I pulled a lighter from my pocket, one of the few things I hadn't dropped in the madness, and flicked it on. The ringleader's voice boomed, louder now, angrier. "You think you can destroy me with fire," he sneered. "I am this place. I am eternal." "Let's find out," I said, tossing the lighter into the oil. The explosion rocked the tent, flames licking up the walls and spreading fast. The skeletal figures shrieked, their hollow mouths stretching unnaturally wide as they crumbled to ash. The ringleader stumbled, his grin faltering for the first time. "No, you don't understand. This place cannot die." "Watch me," I snarled, dragging Sarah toward the collapsing tent flaps. The Ferris wheel toppled over, its metal frame crashing inches behind us as we sprinted through the chaos. The carousel horses dissolved into piles of ash, their haunting cries fading into the roar of the fire. We burst out into the open air, coughing and gasping, but the flames didn't stop. They consumed the big top, the rides, the stalls, everything. For a brief moment, I thought we'd won. But then I looked at my hand. A crumpled carnival ticket sat in my palm, its ink fresh and wet. The ringleader's laughter echoed faintly in the distance, and a voice whispered in my ear, "Once a part of the show, always a part of the show." We stumbled out of the carnival grounds, coughing and gasping for air. The night sky was dark, the stars shrouded by smoke from the fire still raging behind us. I could feel the heat on my back, but I didn't dare look back. Sarah leaned against me, her legs trembling, her breaths shallow. "We made it," she whispered more to herself than to me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to collapse on the ground and let the relief wash over me. But something didn't feel right. The carnival was burning, collapsing in on itself. The Ferris wheel crumbled into a heap of twisted metal. The carousel horses melted into puddles of black sludge, and the big top sagged under the weight of the flames. It should have been over, but it wasn't. I glanced at Sarah, still clutching my arm, her face pale and tear-streaked. "It's done, right? We stopped it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer, because in my other hand, I was holding something that shouldn't have been there. A ticket. I stared at it, my heart sinking. The ink was fresh, the paper crisp, as if it had just been printed. The word "Admit 1" glowed faintly under the moonlight, and beneath it, scrawled in jagged handwriting, was the name Mark. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. "This isn't possible." Sarah's eyes widened as she saw it. "What is that? Where did you—" Before she could finish, the ground beneath us trembled. The air grew thick and heavy, and the faint sound of carnival music floated toward us, carried on a non-existent wind. "No, no, no," I shouted, throwing the ticket to the ground. I stomped on it, but it didn't tear, didn't crumple. It just lay there, unscathed. The laughter came next, low and guttural, growing louder, surrounding us from all sides. Sarah clutched her head, screaming, as the sound pierced the night. And then everything changed. The fire was gone. The smoke vanished, the crumbled rides restored, and the air was suddenly filled with the sickly, sweet scent of cotton candy. I blinked, and we were back at the entrance to the carnival. Except now, it wasn't abandoned. The lights were brighter, the rides gleaming, and the music was louder. The Ferris wheel spun in perfect silence, the carousel horses bobbing up and down with eerie precision. The ticket booth was pristine, its windows glinting under the neon glow, and I was inside it. At first, I didn't understand. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't obey. I was standing behind the ticket booth's counter, my hands resting on the cold metal. I wanted to scream, to call out for Sarah, but no sound came from my mouth. My reflection in the booth's glass stared back at me, but it wasn't entirely mine. My eyes were hollow, glowing faintly like the ringleader's. My face was pale, lifeless, painted with a permanent, grotesque smile. "Mark?" Sarah's voice called out faintly. I looked up and saw her outside the booth, pounding on the glass. "Sarah!" I tried to yell, but she didn't seem to hear me. Her face twisted in horror as she backed away, her screams fading into the distance. I wanted to chase after her, but I couldn't move. My body was rooted in place, a part of the carnival now. The neon sign above the booth flickered to life. "Open for fun." The laughter started again, echoing in my head, and the speaker above crackled. "Let the games begin," a familiar voice boomed, and then the first group of visitors arrived. They approached the booth, laughing and chatting, completely unaware of what waited for them beyond the gates. I tried to warn them, I tried to scream, but all I could do was slide a ticket through the slot with a shaking hand. The carnival had won. I wasn't just part of the show, I was the start of it. Forever. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying journey through the abandoned carnival. If you dare to explore more mysteries and hear more tales like this one, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest videos, and leave a comment below telling us what you would do if you found yourself trapped in a haunted carnival. Until next time, keep the lights on and stay out of the dark. See you in the next video.